The morning sun rose over a new Sol colony like it had for the past 5 years since humans first landed on this green world called Kepler 442b. The farming settlement stretched across wide valleys where families worked together to grow food that would feed people on dozens of other human worlds far from Earth. These colonists had built something beautiful and peaceful. Captain Lee Dong-ho sat in his chair aboard the orbital station high above the planet watching the morning activities begin. In the colony below, his screens showed children running between the solar panels that powered their homes while their parents walked to the fields to check on crops that grew tall and strong in the alien soil. The settlement had only basic defenses, just enough to keep away the local animals and stop small rocks from space that might fall on their homes. Down in the colony, his wife Myra worked in the science lab where she studied how to make earth plants grow better on this new world. She had spent 3 years learning how to change wheat and corn so they would be happy in different soil. Their daughter Hannah was only 7 years old and loved to chase the colorful flying insects that looked like butterflies but had 6 wings instead. Of 4, the Kims lived next door to them in a house with a big garden where they grew vegetables for the whole neighborhood. Mr. Kim worked as a teacher in the colony school, while Mrs. Kim helped take care of the medical center the Parks family ran, the communications center that kept New Seoul connected to other human worlds, and their son Minho always talked about becoming a pilot someday. Life moved slowly and peacefully in New Seoul. Everyone knew everyone else and they helped each other with work and celebrations. When someone got married, the whole colony came to the party. When a baby was born, everyone brought gifts and food. The colonists had left Earth to find a better life, and they had found exactly what they were looking for, but they were being watched high above in the darkness of space. Alien ships moved like shadows between the stars. The Vaktar Confederation had been studying human settlements for many months. Their scouts had visited dozens of human worlds, taking pictures and recording everything they saw. What they found made them very interested. Admiral Keth stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking at the reports his scouts had brought back. These humans were weak creatures who spent more time growing plants than building weapons. Their settlements had almost no military defenses, and their people seemed more interested in farming than fighting. The Admiral had conquered many worlds before, and he recognized easy prey when he saw it. The humans had spread too far too fast across this part of the galaxy without building proper armies to protect themselves. They trusted in peace treaties and diplomatic talks, while real powers like the Vaktar built fleets of warships. The Admiral decided it was time to teach these soft mammals a lesson about who really controlled this sector of space. His intelligence officers had counted the weapons in New Seoul colony. There were only 12 small defense guns meant to shoot down meteors and scare away wild animals. The orbital station had no weapons at all, just communication equipment and sensors. The humans had built their settlement like they expected to live in peace forever. Admiral Keth called his fleet commanders to a meeting in his war room. The holographic display showed New Seoul colony with all its buildings marked in detail. He pointed to the residential areas where families lived, the school where children learned, and the medical center where sick people went for help. Alien commanders looked at the peaceful settlement and saw the same thing their admiral saw. These humans had no real defenses, no military training, and no way to fight back against a proper attack. They lived like prey animals, hiding behind their farm fences, hoping predators would not find them. But the Vaktar had found them. The attack plan was simple. The fleet would drop out of hyperspace, fire their main weapons at the largest population centers, and then leave before any human military forces could respond. It would be a quick lesson that would make humans think twice before expanding into Vaktar space. Admiral Keth gave his orders, and the fleet moved toward Kepler 442b. Their ships were invisible to human sensors, using stealth technology that made them look like empty space. The humans in New Seoul continued their daily routines, completely unaware that death was approaching their world. On the morning of the attack, Captain Lee Dong-ho was reading supply reports when his sensors picked up strange energy readings. The orbital station began to shake as unknown forces pulled at its hull. He looked at his screens trying to understand what was happening, but the readings made no sense. Then the first plasma beam hit the Colony the energy weapons struck the residential district where families were eating breakfast and children were getting ready for school. Buildings that had stood for 5 years were turned into molten glass in seconds. Hundreds of people died before they even knew they were under attack. Li Dong-ho watched in horror as more beams fell from the sky like lightning from hell. His home, where his wife and daughter lived, disappeared in a flash of white light. The school where children learned about math and science became a crater of burning metal. The medical center where people went to get well was reduced to ash, and smoke emergency alarms screamed through the orbital station as more and more of the colony vanished under the alien bombardment. Li Dong-ho tried to contact his wife and daughter, but their communication devices were gone along with everything else in their neighborhood. 8,000 people lived in New Seoul Colony, and most of them died in the first 10 minutes of the attack. The alien fleet commander broadcast a message to the few survivors who had reached underground shelters. His voice was cold and cruel as he spoke to the humans cowering in the dark. Your species has expanded beyond the boundaries we allow. This attack is your only warning. Return to your homeworlds and do not venture into our space again. If you ignore this warning, more of your settlements will burn. Then the alien ships vanished back into hyperspace, leaving behind only ruins and smoke. Where a peaceful farming colony had stood, the survivors crawled out of their shelters to find their world destroyed, their families dead, and their dreams turned to nightmares. Captain Li Dong-ho sat alone on the orbital station, looking down at the burning wreckage of everything he had loved. His wife was gone, his daughter was gone, and 8,000 innocent people had been murdered for the crime of growing food on a distant world. But what the aliens did not know was that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They thought they had attacked weak farmers, but they had actually attacked something much more dangerous. They had attacked human civilians, and humanity had very specific ways of dealing with people who hurt their families. The dragons were about to wake up. News of the New Seoul massacre reached Earth within hours through quantum communication relays. President Park Jin-woo sat in the emergency cabinet meeting, watching footage of the smoldering ruins where 8,000 human beings had lived just days before. The images showed children's playgrounds reduced to radioactive ash and family homes turned into glass craters. Defense Minister Kim Young-soo placed a thick folder on the conference table. Mr. President, the Vaktar Confederation has 15 core worlds and approximately 40 billion citizens. Their military consists of 200 battle cruisers and 500 smaller vessels. They consider themselves the dominant power in this sector. Park Jin-woo studied the surveillance photos of alien civilians going about their daily lives on Vaktar Prime, completely unaware of what their military had just unleashed. How long since we've activated the Dragon Protocol? Never, sir. This would be the first time since its development. The Dragon Protocol had been humanity's most classified military program for over a century. While colonies like New Seoul appeared defenseless, they served as both homes and early warning systems for something far more dangerous. Humanity had learned from their own violent history that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the promise of overwhelming retaliation. Admiral Choi Soo-jin received her orders within the hour. The woman who had never lost a battle was being given command of humanity's most devastating military assets. Hidden throughout human space, cloaked shipyards had been constructing weapons that would make the Vaktar fleet look like children's toys. Kim Tae-ho and his engineering crew worked around the clock, activating systems that had waited decades for this moment. Massive dreadnoughts began emerging from asteroid mining facilities that had concealed them for generations. These weren't exploration vessels or cargo haulers. These were weapons of war designed by a species that had perfected conflict long before reaching the stars. The message went out through diplomatic channels to every alien government in the galaxy. Humanity politely informed them that the Vaktar Confederation had attacked civilian targets and that Earth was responding accordingly. Other species should avoid Vaktar space for the next 30 days while humanity conducted pest control operations. The Vaktar home system looked peaceful when Admiral Choi Soo-jin arrived with her massive fleet. Cargo ships moved between planets, carrying food and supplies while civilian traffic filled the space lanes around their worlds. The alien military Garrison felt safe behind their defensive satellites and patrol ships. They had no idea that death was already moving through their system like a silent plague. Commander Song Minho piloted his stealth destroyer through the outer asteroid belt. Where ice rocks tumbled slowly in the darkness, his ship was completely invisible to Vactar sensors, using technology that bent light around the hull like water flowing around a stone. Behind him, 200 human warships spread throughout the system, moving like ghosts through space. Each human vessel carried enough weapons to destroy entire cities and was operated by crews who had seen the footage from New Sol. They knew exactly what they were here to do and why. 8,000 innocent people had died. The time for talking was over, and the time for justice had begun. The Vactar Defense Fleet first detected human ships when the weapons began charging. Energy signatures lit up their sensors like angry stars appearing in empty space. Admiral Keth, the same commander who had ordered the attack on New Sol, screamed orders at his bridge crew as more and more contacts appeared on his screens. What he was seeing should have been impossible. No species could hide this many massive warships or move them across interstellar space without being detected. The humans had seemed like weak farmers who could barely defend themselves, but now hundreds of advanced warships surrounded his home system. Lieutenant Park So-young sat at her communication station listening to panicked Vactar voices flooding their military channels. Sir, she reported they are calling for help from every system in their space. They think we have over 500 ships here. Admiral Troy studied the tactical display that showed 8 billion Vactar civilians living on the planets below. These were not the people who had attacked New Sol, but they were citizens of the government that had ordered the massacre. She opened a communication channel that would reach every Vactar receiver in the system. You have 1 hour to surrender your entire military fleet and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will result in planetary bombardment. You attacked our civilians, so now you will face our military. Choose wisely. The Vactar military commanders held an emergency meeting aboard Admiral Keth flagship. They looked at their screens showing human warships that were larger and more advanced than anything they had ever seen. Their own vessels that had seemed so powerful against farming colonies now looked like toys compared to these instruments of war. Some commanders wanted to fight, believing they could win through superior numbers. Others wanted to surrender immediately, knowing they were facing something far beyond their ability to resist. Admiral Keth decided to test human resolve by attacking with his fastest ships. The first battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. Vactar cruisers that had destroyed New Sol were reduced to burning scrap metal by human weapons designed to fight real military forces. The aliens fired their most powerful energy beams at human ships and watched their weapons bounce off armor plating that was stronger than anything they had ever encountered. Human antimatter torpedoes struck Vactar vessels and turned them into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Advanced alien shields that had protected them in dozens of previous battles collapsed under focused particle beam attacks that cut through their hulls like knives through paper. When Admiral Keth flagship exploded, taking him and 3,000 crew members into death, the remaining Vactar ships began broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency they could find. But humanity had learned long ago that mercy shown too quickly was often mistaken for weakness. By alien minds, Commander Oh Jong-soo led the boarding parties onto surrendering Vactar ships where alien crew members cowered in fear. They had expected to fight farmers with simple weapons. Instead, they faced human soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls. The occupation of the Vactar home system took only 6 hours. Human ships took control of every space station, every orbital facility, and every military installation. The aliens who had felt so powerful when attacking defenseless colonists now found themselves prisoners of war facing trial for mass murder. News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light through communication networks that connected hundreds of worlds. Alien governments that had been watching the conflict suddenly realized they needed to completely change how they thought about humanity. The species that grew food and built peaceful colonies had revealed themselves to be something much more dangerous. They were predators who had been hiding their claws behind friendly smiles and trade agreements. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Admiral Choi established her command center on Vactar Prime, where she could oversee the complete dismantling of alien military power. Every weapon, every ship, every piece of equipment that could threaten human civilians would be destroyed or captured. The Vactar Confederation as a military force would cease to exist. Captain Lee Dong-ho received a message from the admiral telling him that justice had begun. The people who killed his wife and daughter were either dead or awaiting trial for their crimes new. Seoul would be rebuilt, and the memory of those who died would be honored forever. But this was only the beginning. The dragons had awakened, and they were very, very angry. Colonel Bae Hyun-woo led his troops through the streets of the Vactar capital city, where millions of alien civilians watched human soldiers march past their homes. These were not the soft farmers the Vactar had expected to encounter. These were professional warriors equipped with weapons that could level city blocks and armor that could withstand direct hits from tank cannons. The trials began immediately in the largest building in the city, which had once housed the Vactar military high command. Every alien officer who had participated in planning or carrying out the new Seoul attack was brought before human military courts to face justice for mass murder. Lee Soo-jin served as the chief prosecutor. She had studied alien psychology for decades and knew exactly how to present evidence that would make the galaxy understand what had happened. She showed holographic recordings of children playing in New Seoul just hours before they were vaporized by alien weapons. The evidence was overwhelming. Vactar military records showed they had deliberately targeted civilian areas, including schools, hospitals, and residential neighborhoods. They had planned to kill as many humans as possible to send a message about expansion into their territory. What terrified the remaining Vactar leadership was not just the trials, but the systematic way humans dismantled their entire military structure. Captain Oh Jong-soo supervised the destruction of weapons factories, while Major Kim Eun-ji oversaw the capture of every military vessel, every gun, every missile, every piece of equipment capable of threatening human civilians was methodically eliminated. Human engineers studied Vactar technology and then destroyed anything that could be used for warfare. The aliens were being turned from a military power into a supervised protectorate. The message to the wider galaxy was crystal clear: attack human farmers and face human soldiers. The species that had appeared peaceful and vulnerable had revealed themselves as something far more dangerous. They were gardeners who could become destroyers when their gardens were burned. News broadcasts across alien space showed footage of Vactar cities under human occupation, their proud military reduced to prisoners awaiting trial for war crimes. Species that had previously viewed humanity as soft expansion targets began reassessing their diplomatic strategies very quickly. The mammals had hidden their true nature behind smiles and trade agreements, but underneath lay something ancient and terrible. They were descendants of apex predators who had conquered their own world before reaching for the stars. Commander Yu Min-suk established the new government protocols that would ensure this never happened again. The Vactar Confederation would exist under human oversight, with their military permanently disbanded and their aggressive expansion permanently ended. They would learn to be neighbors rather than conquerors, or they would learn to be extinct. The choice was entirely theirs, but the humans would be watching everything they did for the next 100 years. Alien diplomats from dozens of species arrived at Vactar Prime to observe the trials and occupation. They needed to understand exactly what humanity was capable of when their civilians were threatened. The peaceful traders they thought they knew had become something else entirely. President Park Jin-woo addressed the galactic community from the ruins of New Seoul, where construction crews were already rebuilding homes and schools. He stood beside the memorial being erected for 8,000 murdered humans and spoke words that would echo across space for generations. Humanity seeks peace with all species, but we will have justice for our dead. Those who attack our civilians will face our military. Those who threaten our families will meet our wrath. We are gardeners who nurture life across the cosmos, but we are also dragons who will burn worlds to ash if our people are harmed. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy learned the age of testing human resolve was over. 6 months after the New Seoul massacre, Ambassador Shin Ja-hoon stood before the Galactic Council in their Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Kepler Station. Behind him were holographic images of the memorial erected for 8,000 humans who had died simply for trying to grow food on a distant world. Their names were carved in stone that would outlast the stars themselves, and their memory would remind the galaxy forever about what happened when innocent humans were murdered. The ambassador looked out at representatives from hundreds of alien species who had come to understand what humanity truly was. The galaxy had learned that humans were gardeners who would nurture life across the cosmos, but they were also dragons who would burn entire civilizations to ash if their gardens were threatened. The choice of which face humanity showed depended entirely on how other species chose to behave toward human civilians. Former Admiral Keth had been executed for war crimes, but his replacement now served as governor of Vactar Prime under human supervision. Every day he read reports of Vactar compliance with the new regulations. No military vessels were allowed, no weapons could be exported, and no aggressive expansion would be tolerated. The species that had once terrorized smaller civilizations was now learning to contribute to galactic society through science and trade rather than conquest. Their best minds worked on peaceful projects while human observers made sure they never again built weapons of war on Earth. President Park Jin-Woo signed the Eternal Vigilance Accords, which ensured that humanity would never again appear vulnerable to potential aggressors. The Dragon Protocol would remain permanently active, with hidden shipyards continuing to produce weapons and human colonies protected by the promise of overwhelming retaliation. Captain Lee Dong-ho now commanded one of the new defense platforms orbiting human space. He had lost his wife and daughter to alien aggression, but he had gained something else: the absolute certainty that no human family would ever suffer the same fate again. Every day he looked at pictures of Hannah chasing butterflies in the gardens of New Seoul and remembered why the dragons had awakened. His personal loss had become the galaxy's lesson about what happened when humans were pushed too far. The rebuilt colony of New Seoul was more beautiful than ever, with parks and schools and homes where new families were learning to live in peace, but hidden beneath the farms were defense systems that could stop any attack while orbital platforms watched the skies for threats. Ambassador Shin continued his address to the Galactic Council, explaining the new reality that all species would need to accept. Humanity offered two choices to every civilization they encountered. You can choose to see us as gardeners, farmers, and peaceful traders who want nothing more than to grow our crops and raise our children. Under alien suns, we will welcome you as friends, share our technology, and build a better future together. Or you can choose to see us as dragons, ancient predators capable of turning entire star systems into graveyards when properly motivated. We will show you what our ancestors learned during 10,000 years of warfare on our homeworld. Most species, having witnessed the complete destruction of Vactar military power, chose very wisely indeed. They welcomed human farmers into their sectors, traded peacefully with human merchants, and never ever made threats against human civilians. Because the dragons were always watching, always ready, and absolutely never to be awakened again. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity had found its place not as victims but as guardians of peace through strength. The age of testing human resolve was over. The age of respecting human power had begun.